Looking back on it, I don't think anyone saw Xavier Renegade Angel becoming as popular as it did, but to quote Rosa Luxemburg, after it happens, it is seen as having been inevitable. It fits the humor of that time very well, that 2016 kind of XD random but hyper sincerity that honestly still rings true today. In terms of other adult animation that has become popular, it's been much more predictable. Duckman and Clone High make sense to be popular. Duckman because of how similar it is to BoJack Horseman and also just being incredibly well written and funny. Clone High makes sense too, due to most of the people that like adult animation come from high school and can relate with that kind of setting, and also the show's fast, quotable, and direct style. Also, JFK in the presence of a hot goth girl. At the time of writing and recording, the general vibe from Clone High is that it's popular, but popular enough to be annoying. We're starting to see people annoyed by the same JFK memes, and they're ready to move on to something else. So, I don't know, a month, maybe 2 weeks until you start seeing some new piece of adult animation that gets really, really popular. So when we move on from Clone High, the question is, what show will we go to next? Now, I made the mistake of getting into an argument with someone who was a giant Undergrads fan about what will be the next great mature cartoon that gets memed on. I am now in a bet with this person, and it is getting to the point where my car, about $2,000, and my Twitter account are on the line if I lose. He said that Undergrads is going to become the next big animated meme show because everyone in high school was going to be going to college soon. Not to mention it's one of the best written pieces of animation to ever exist. And I put my bets on MTV Downtown for the same reason. It's incredibly well written, but it's because all of the students are going to be flunking out, and due to the depression of existing in the world right now, MTV Downtown will be able to hold on to those kinds of people. Now, you may say that this is the exact same argument, with the only difference being hopes for the current youth, but I forgot to add one important thing to my argument. MTV Downtown has a way hotter goth girl. This is how I win. Actually, Jessie is pretty cool too. Most goth girls rule, to be honest. In animation, there is nothing more valuable to getting fans to like a show than having a goth girl, especially when she's actually developed and not some walking TNA, but more on that later. Downtown is full of things ripe for meme potential. It has the self-hating nerd that never gets laid and lusts after girls, which will obviously be called a simp. In fact, there are two of those characters. It has the goth girl that all the e-girls will then use as their profile picture, but then on top of that, it has the snarky irony poison girl that all the girls that hate e-girls can use as their profile pic. So everyone gets to have some fun. Speaking of fun characters, you have the one that will get all the best of highlights. You have the rejection of popular culture and the hating of nerds. It has everything necessary to become a beloved meme show. Oh, and it's also good. Like, it's fantastic. It has stuff that transcends any of this meme stuff. There's more to a show's enjoyment than the memes it's able to spawn, but before we get into that, let's talk more about what this show even is. MTV Downtown takes place in New York circa 1999. We followed the daily events of Alex, a college dropout in his mid-20s working for minimum wage at a copy shop. He's your average nerd from the late 90s, collects action figures, loves Star Wars, says no to anime but yes to science fiction shows. He has recently ascended a tad past the typical nerd standard by moving out of his parents' place and getting his own. A shitty hole-in-the-wall studio apartment. And that's how it just is in New York, baby. Like most men of his age, he has someone that he is trying to get with, and like most nerds who don't often get with women, it's a goth girl. Some things are timeless. Serena is a real goth, with the dick-stomping boots, the pale skin, the dark hair, those purple lips, everything people want to look like and that people want to get with. Most of the show centers around these two characters and the big question of, will Alex grow a pair of balls and actually confess to this girl? Along the way, we meet up with Alex's assortment of friends. We have the friend since middle school Jen, also known as best girl in the show, an irony-poisoned lass who holds a resentment for the modern world. No, not in that way. She just dislikes fake people and stuff. There's the eccentric goat, the most quotable and the one with the true waste man's pride. He lives off the grid, only coming back into civilization to either fuck or get wasted. Goat is one of those characters that everyone loves from this show. He oozes personality. There is more story and character in him than most entire shows have. There is also Alex's sister Shaka, a party freak that cares more about the moment than anything else. A constant hedonistic club girl. And also annoying, but that's besides the point. Shaka lets us have our B stories, where we also meet her friends. Mecca, the pacifist who's always down for fun. Fruity, the wannabe playboy who just can't stop being sexist.
Do fries come with that shake? Cause I'm feeling greasy.
And Matt, the cool, aloof 90s graffiti artist. Downtown follows all these characters on their quest to not be so unsatisfied with life. Downtown is not an action-packed show. There are, some chase scenes, some fights, but that is not what the show is loved and praised for. Dialogue is where this show shines. It has some of the best voice acting I have ever heard out of any piece of animated media. I cannot think of any piece that has dialogue as smooth as this. Everyone can work off of each other. Every and ah is muttered just perfectly, like a completely normal conversation, but not enough that you can tell they're faking normalcy.
I could be bleeding from a gunshot wound in the middle of the street and no one would care.
No, that's not true. People would care that you were blocking traffic.
Oh, thank you. You're a true friend.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex, man, you look like I should feel. Seeing as how I woke up with a new tattoo next to a girl that looks like ass.
And I'm just a little out of it. I didn't get any sleep last night.
Nice shooting, Tex. I'm happy for you. How's it feel to be a man?
Yeah, man, look, everybody runs out the car into the next one. And I'm there by myself, man, because I didn't know what to do. I was like, whoa, right? And then, I don't know, he's coming right at me. He has this, weird look in his face, and I'm scared, man, because he looked crazy. He sits down next to me. I can feel his knee against mine. I can smell his breath. It's bad breath, man, right? I'm thinking, be cool, man. Don't let on that you're free. Because I was pretty scared, man. Yeah. And he looks at me. He says, "Wanna buy a gun?"
Who's yelling?
I don't know, some freak. Hey, didn't I see your picture on the Goth Chick of the Week website?
That's original.
Everyone reacts in a way fitting of their characters. They interject, they offer support, add quips, just like friends and human beings do. This is benefited even more by the realistic nature of what's happening in the show itself. MTV Downtown's initial ideas and scripts were made up of interviews that were done on the street with New Yorkers, just asking what their stories were, who they were. The original idea for the show was to interview different New Yorkers, have them tell stories, and give their stories more life through animation, but this got scrapped for something with a little bit more of a through line. Only one of these street interviews is uploaded to YouTube, and I couldn't find the DVD anywhere. I suggest watching the show and then watching the interview because it's absolutely hilarious. Literal quotes are taken from the inspiration for Serena and then brought into the show itself. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, the dunk tank thing. I think the reason that they kept me so long and I was really good at it is because in that neighborhood, Bensonhurst is where it is, it's like this total Guido neighborhood, and I was like the only one there that wasn't this total Guido, even at that young age.
Either. But I figure I've already had the worst job in the world, so what could be so bad?
Yeah? What were you, a dominatrix or something?
No, Matt. No, one summer I was the dunk tank girl at Pippi's, this kiddie amusement park.
Pippi.
I think the reason I attracted so much business is because I grew up in the neighborhood. Everyone hated me.
Really?
Yeah, I was so different from them. I'd yell like, "Hey, Vinny in the pink shirt, you throw like a freaking girl." I had water up my nose constantly.
On top of that, a lot of the voice actors were either first-time amateurs or the people that they got for inspiration in the first place. It adds a lot of reality to the show. There's a specific line from the behind the scenes where they talk about how the voice actors had the ability to improvise and move lines around, change stuff. They called it a reality filter, which I love so much.
The actors, when we did the read-through, they were very critical of the scripts. Anything they didn't feel, it was kind of like our reality filter. They would, and we would give them a certain amount of leeway to change lines and things, like the way they were said and stuff, say, hey, how can you make this better? And if it fit with what we thought worked for the story, absolutely, they changed it, did a lot of ad-libbing and stuff.
It really gives this world life because you can really connect with these people. I know Alex, I know Goat, they're just not named that in my life. Every character works well together, but there are certain pairs that just nail it every single time that they're on screen together. The biggest one for me is Jen and Alex. The hyper-sincere nerd with the irony-poisoned asshole is instant comedy every time I see it. As I mentioned earlier, Goat is a quote machine in this show, getting a ton of killer lines and working well with almost every single character on screen.
Did you see that? She looked at me funny.
Aren't you used to that reaction by now?
Newsweek? I need the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue if they expect me to do my business. Assy. Even better.
Lift your end a bit, Jen.
Is that a come on?
Yeah, sure.
Aren't you an easy one?
Come
Get
on.
down and spread him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just that she's cool and all. I'm just not sure if she's the kind of woman I usually go for.
Alex, my friend, don't you know that the key to happiness can be found in 3 simple words?
Use the Force?
No. Lower your standards.
Beyond the dialogue of the show, the aesthetics itself are incredible. The early 2000s are all over this show, especially in the OST. It's inspired by hip-hop, acid techno, jungle, and most of all, the works of DJ Shadow. Introducing's influence is all over the OST, but also the general vibe of the New York electric scene is felt everywhere as well. Besides the music and the other general vibes you would get from a show made in the 90s in New York, there are many other things that make this show so stuck in its time period, but in the most beautiful way. Characters say things like chicken head, which is the funniest thing to me. For those that do not know what a chicken head is...
Oh, you can find that anywhere. In a hood, on a block. It's a bird. One of those that you just bring home and wear out.
That is correct.
Besides all the stuff that places this firmly in the early 2000s, we have the actual art of the show itself, which is just lovely. These backgrounds are great, inspired by expressionists and surrealists. They have this atmosphere that I just love. One of the things that I noticed about this show is that there's a lack of blue skies. Almost every time you see it, it's either green, yellow, some kind of dark brown. It adds an unsettling nature to everything. It makes it feel very off. It has this unnatural feeling to it, this disgusting feeling. In fact, one of the few times that we see any blue in the sky is the first scene in the show. And I think this scene is a perfect encapsulation of what this show is. We see New York City looking all beautiful and nice, getting eviscerated by an Akira explosion. It demolishes everything, the buildings, the inhabitants, and then we fade into a scanning at the copy shop. Alex is clearly angry at the current state of things, maybe not in terms of a grand communist sense, but in the sense of being highly dissatisfied with where he is. New York is rarely portrayed in anything close to a positive light. You have Frank Sinatra, your aunt telling you New York is cool. I can't think of any other ones. Everyone knows it's shit to live in New York. Unless you're a millionaire in your penthouse, you're gonna have to deal with either bad plumbing, black mold, cockroaches, or all 3. What I'm saying here is not revolutionary by any means. This is a basic observation that any show that takes place in New York or talks about New York makes. But Downtown does its critique a little bit differently. There's, the very obvious critiques you can do. There's an entire episode about how the subway system sucks, but that's, nothing out of the ordinary. General assholes are a problem too. The best example of this is this one scene within that subway episode where Chaka and Mecca need to catch their train, and they nearly get there, and...
Wait! Hold the door!
But again, that's nothing all that crazy. Where Downtown gets its hatred of New York from is not something like a bad subway system or one shitty person. It's from the culture and those who are satisfied and happy with the world. The thing that Downtown, in particular Jen and sometimes Alex, have problems with is that they are dissatisfied and other people are happy. Of course, I can already hear the philosophers getting ready to dunk on me from the three-point line, hitting me in the face with their balls. Oh, but how do we define happiness? Okay, fair enough. I expect nothing less from you, to be honest. Jen and Alex are not necessarily mad that the world is not full of people trying to find wisdom and understand the perfect form of beauty. The dissatisfaction that they have comes from envy, of course. It comes from those who are successful in ways that you are not. It comes from those who are out there getting laid, who have the attention of others, who aren't fat. You get the point. Actually, getting laid is an incredibly important part of this show, but more on that later. The envy is then amplified by Jen also being mad that people have to fake this aura to be able to achieve these goals. Jen's roommate Leia has her entire character basically built around this, faking personalities, faking orgasms, to be able to have rich men spoil her. Leia gets laid more than anyone else in the show, and hey, shoutouts to her. But the main thing that I take away from her character is that she's not satisfied by any of this. She's satisfied by, you know, having the wealth, being able to go do fun things in the first place, but she's never satisfied by what she has to do to get there. The faking of the personality is one of the things that Jen just absolutely hates about Leia, but in the end, she's still able to, you know, be friends with her, hang out with her, and stuff like that. Where the fake personality really, really gets on Jen's nerves is with Serena. Jen thinks that Serena's entire appearance is superficial, that she's not actually goth, that she puts on this fake goth face to be able to get people to pay attention to her, mainly boys, of course.
Let me tell you all you need to know, okay? Superficial poser, all right? Hate girls like that.
Yeah, like you know so much about her.
Look, I know that anyone with $10 can buy fishnet stockings. It doesn't automatically make you exotic.
Actually, I really like the kind with the black and white stripes.
Through Jen's eyes, Serena is faking this entire personality just to be able to appeal to a fetish, not because that's who she is. Yet at the same time, while Jen is saying that Serena is fake and not real and a poser, she is projecting this entire goth personality onto her, except she doesn't really understand what goth is at times. At times, Jen is angry because she's going around playing her fucking weird instruments in a dark room to nobody except the bartender and some guy that's been there since 1 a.m. the day before. But at the same time, she's also a murderer into stripping and weird BDSM. Of course, most of this ends up not being true. The more we get to know Serena, we realize that she is, you know, just a normal person. She just likes that aesthetic and she likes that culture. She's real. She even understands the kind of attention that is drawn to her by her dressing up all goth.
I mean, you've got a great look.
Thanks, but it gives people really weird ideas about me. Like I must worship Satan or something. I mean, I do have a pagan worldview, but that's not the same thing. Or they're like, hey baby, suck my blood. As if I'm some poser and rice freak.
She is an e-girl and understands what that implies and the attention that that will bring. And I mean, literally, she's an e-girl. She has her own website where she uploads pictures of herself. Like, this is before OnlyFans. This woman is a fucking innovator. Jen hates more than just the people that partake in this fake culture. She also hates where they go. Clubs and trendy spots with techno and grinding and the loud music. These places full of people pretending to be who they aren't end up taking away the real estate of real, genuine spots with real, genuine food and real, genuine music, and replace them with identical clubs where everyone can be filled in and feel like they're special. And I disagree at some points here, but I think anyone that has spent any time talking to someone who does art in any major city knows the pain and fear of gentrification, of a small little place making a block or an area of the city popular, and eventually that same club being shut down because they couldn't afford rent anymore because they brought the business there in the first place. I don't think that's exactly what's going on here. I think it's just more of a hatred of the new, and Jen's just a curmudgeonly old lady doing a Grandpa Simpson monologue.
Oh, I wish I could close down every trendy night spot in this city. First stop, Flame. Snuff that bitch out.
Look, I hate that club as much as you do, but I don't want to be ruining anyone's fun.
It's not ruining anybody's fun, Alex. Look, we have to stop these trendies before they take over.
Jen is absolutely a curmudgeon and hates the modern world, but to be honest, I think most of us do. I want to critique her because I do think Jen is wrong in many ways. I've had plenty of fun at clubs, and I'm a absolute social outcast that's making YouTube videos at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I do think that there is a high amount of relatability with a character like Jen. Jen, besides GOAT, is clearly the fan favorite. A lot of people like her. A lot of people resonate with that anger at the current state of things because, yeah, I'm not satisfied by this, and seeing other people that are, it doesn't make me want to ask how they did it. It makes me mad. Speaking of being mad at things, this show hates nerds so much. While modern culture and alternative culture gets shat on all the time by Jen, this show as an entirety and nearly every character in there has it out for nerds. They get shit on constantly. And there's an interesting distinction to be made between the modern notion of the nerd and the early 2000s, late 90s version of the nerd. In modern times, the nerd has, well, no, that's too strong, is normal, to the point that there is nothing special in being traditionally nerdy. A movie based on comic books has made more money than any film ever. One of the most beloved TV shows of all time is a fantasy action show full of incest and internal fantasy politics. Goku has become so beloved that I have seen him wear more Bape and Supreme hoodies than any actual living person. And people are falling in love and memeing the living shit out of old cartoons. Nerds have escaped their oppression and are now fully mainstream. However, this is downtown. This is not real life in 2020. Nerds are losers that don't even know what sex is, and if they were ever in the room with a woman with as much as her socks off, would burst into flames immediately. They are at the bottom of the ladder. They are the lowest of the low. The hate nerds get in this show is vicious, but I don't think it's at that Karate Kid level where, you know, you do coke in a bathroom and you beat the living crap out of the first nerd you see. This is a deep love, a deep, deep, deep love that loops back to hate. As I said earlier in this essay, this show was made based on talking to real people and getting their stories. And I'm not sure how many nerds that they talk to be able to get ideas for this show, but you can feel that if they weren't interviewing people, these people have lived these experiences because you see it all. You see grown, buff guys wearing Sailor Scout uniforms. You see furries, comic book shop loiterers. You see all kinds of people that you just know were either interviewed or just known so well, because I know these furries. I know those Sailor Scout buff dudes. Like, those people are so real to me. It's the kind of hate that can only be born out of love, out of knowing something so well that it just boils inside of you. And when you have the opportunity to let loose, you let loose. But still, nerd culture means a lot to the creators of this show, and this is just a chance to poke at it, make fun of it, burn it in that way that Jen does.
If you're gonna make jokes, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Okay, but Alex, you know the story. You know I only rip on you because my low self-esteem makes me incapable of expressing any sort of sincere emotion, right?
Get out, Jen.
You lost your whoopee. I lost Mr. T and Hannibal.
You know, it's that thing that you do with your family members. You know, you talk shit about them, but if anyone else does, ooh, you're gonna get pissed. People may look at this show and just say that all these characters are just straight up assholes. People are criticized for being part of the mainstream, they're criticized for being alternative to it, and they're criticized for being a nerd. The only respectable position for these characters is to look at the world from an ironic distance and make fun of it, or to exist entirely outside of it like Goat does. Is there anything that these characters actually like that the show can respect? Is there anything that can be embraced, no irony needed, and can just be said to be good? And the answer is yes. And the answer to what that is sex. Well, everyone is very different in terms of what they like, where they are, what they want from life, and how they fill the time of being conscious. All of them want to, in some way, they want to fuck. Fruity with his constant attempts to try and get laid and constantly being shot down. Alex chasing after goth girls, Leia always trying to get someone new, Goat systematically going through every single girl at the bar if he has to, Jen being angered beyond words at the length of her dry spell. Sex is a central part to this story. The show doesn't really have arcs. Well, okay. Characters get put into scenarios and they learn their lesson over the course of an episode, but most of the time the character stays the same. And the only arc that really continues from episode to episode is the question of, will Alex get laid and who will that be with? These are the real important questions, you know, not the meaning of life, not what does it mean to know, not who can quote the most French philosophers. It's no, who's gonna fuck who? The two most obvious answers to this question are Jen and Serena. But let's focus on Jen first. Jen is, the childhood friend route, the default route that you go down in the case of a story like this. Alex and Jen are great on-screen entertainment, but a relationship wouldn't exactly work the same. There's an entire episode that focuses on this point, where a constant amount of flirty comments and horniness over drinks eventually boils over into...
want you to emote here, okay? Okay. Yes! Yes!
Well, into fake drunken sex, not real drunken sex. Ultimately, the two agree that having sex would ruin a relationship like this, and that they're already pretty tight as be, and both these characters are loners, and, you know, sometimes just want to stay with someone as a friend and not, you know, have sex get in the way of a perfectly good thing. This is a message I don't see too often in stories like this. You don't need to fuck everyone. Sometimes it's important to just keep a friend rather than getting inside of them. Sadly, we do not see Jen get any more chances like this in the series, unless this scene with Goat counts. I don't know, maybe she did it off screen. She seems happy. Alex, on the other hand, gets a couple more chances with a couple more characters. Alex gets a chance with this girl, Teeny, thanks to Goat's help, and he passes on the opportunity to do anything, even though he was surely going to get something. The feeling is that he wants to be with someone that matters, not someone that he just met a couple hours ago. This moment shows something important to what sex means to Alex and to other characters in the show. Sex is, you know, important and fun, of course. Everyone loves busting a nut, but what is needed is that feeling of being with someone else, or getting with someone that you really care about and really want to be with.
You have nothing to complain about. You're a girl. You can get laid anytime you want.
Oh, I can't stand when guys say that. Yeah, sure I could, if I was entirely unchoosy and willing to pick up a complete stranger in some sleazy bar.
And what's so bad about...
But I never get anywhere with the guys I really want.
Yeah, well, have you noticed the more you want something, the less likely it is you're gonna get it?
That's so deep. Have you been reading those weird religious brochures again? I haven't had sex for so long, I've forgotten what it's like.
I've heard stories from the big kids.
This is not, however, loving someone for their immortal essence or anything like that. On the final episode of the show, Serena, this person who's been flirting with Alex off and on the entire time, whilst also being this counterculture goth bae, removes her makeup, removes her boots, removes the goth aesthetic, and instead of Alex loving her unique soul, he doesn't even recognize her, and starts asking if she's going to go back to that old style. Make no mistake, Alex is no better than someone like Fruity, who's going to go after any woman he finds attractive without a second thought. For Alex, it just takes a little bit more time to get to that phase. He's nervous. Don't rush him.
You're gonna go back to the old look, right?
I don't know. I mean, you got me thinking that maybe I've been hiding behind the clothes and the makeup. I mean, I kind of like the new me. Leather chokers and corsets, who needs them, right?
Yeah, who needs them?
The ending of Downtown is one of those endings that I think gets slept on a lot, but is ultimately incredibly important for the overall point of the show. After blowing off Serena because she got rid of her aesthetic, he feels guilty and goes back to make up for it, to reveal that not only has she returned to her old goth aesthetic, she has returned to her old ex-boyfriend, and puts Alex firmly in the friend zone.
You're amazing, and I wish I could just... What I'm trying to say is...
Alex, geez, you don't have to pour it on. We're cool, okay? You're still my friend. I'll see you around. Come on, Lestat.
Alex gets mad, as most men do when this happens, and uses this newfound anger to grow some balls and hit on some random woman. He looks to be successful, or at least not instantly blown off. He goes away, and both Jen and Goat make a couple of jokes, and the show ends. So what are we, the viewer, supposed to take from this? The message surely isn't love someone for their immortal soul. Like, when Alex is shocked and kind of sad that Serena dumped her old aesthetic, it's not framed as bad, it's framed as a genuine concern that we should take seriously. I mean, you may disagree with that on a personal level, and we'll argue about that later, but let's move from that point. Is it that we should forget any idea of waiting in the moment and just go with whoever we want? If this show is so insistent that sex is important, then this final moment is saying, don't wait, go for it with anyone. But this doesn't feel right either due to how Fruity and Goat are framed as being either losers or waste men. They're achieving this ideal of go at it with anyone, no matter what, always try and do your best. But they are not given that praise. Fruity is seen as a loser who can't get with anyone, and Goat, well, personally, I think Goat is the coolest character in the show, but the show doesn't really support that. You need to kind of come with your own ideas of coolness if you want to think that. My personal interpretation of this final scene is that one should not completely invest themselves in one person. It's a message against one-itises. In case you don't know, a one-itis is completely focusing on the one or anything like that. The show is saying that sex is important, but it's not just about busting into anything that moves, nor is it about loving someone for an immortal soul. It's about that gray area in the middle that philosophers always obsess over. Giving people the time of day and not being obsessed with one person or one culture. This is actually the big message of the show. Though we have our big cynical moments where we really dislike these people who are either completely preppy or completely modern or completely goth or completely nerds, whatever, I think you get the picture. That doesn't mean you should completely ignore them. That doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for a good friend or a good story at least. The big thing that I took from MTV Downtown is that, you know, you can be a goth, you can be against goths, you can be a party girl, you can be against parties. You're probably going to be an interesting person. You may be an asshole, but you're at least going to have some story, some kind of element to add to a conversation or add to a life. This is found in many different places, but I want to add the most interesting one. Remember that asshole that I talked about earlier that closed the subway door? Well, he shows up later in the episode and confronts the girls about them, you know, basically ruining his day. Yet in the end credits sequence, we see them playing bumper cars with him. Now, I think this is a really interesting scene. You know, maybe they just wanted to use this guy more, or it's a message about even if, you know, you disagree with someone, you know, you don't exactly get along with them, you can still hang with them, you can still talk to them. Even though Jen absolutely hates party people, and even though Alex and Jaka really don't get along all that well, they still hang out, they still like each other, they still, you know, are able to talk to each other, relate to each other. Hell, even the weirdest pairings in this show are still able to relate and be able to have conversations and, you know, make the general mood a little bit better. Yeah, they get into fights. Yeah, sometimes stuff doesn't go exactly right, but that doesn't stop anyone from being able to be friends with each other. It's a real shame that there never got to be a season 2. The reason season 1 was all that we got was probably due to bad advertising and not a lot of people watching the show. But, and maybe this is just my headcanon, but I think that if season 2 happened, Serena would still be a character that Alex would talk to. Not because, you know, they have a voice actress and they have a character that they've already developed that fans liked. I mean, it would obviously be for that reason, but if we wanted to give a higher reason to it, it would be that even if someone just views you as a friend and doesn't want to fuck you and you come from completely different backgrounds, that has never stopped anyone from being able to just come together and like each other. Hell, there's a joke going on throughout the entire show where Serena assumes that the dumpy, boring clothes that Alex wears is just his work outfit, and in reality, he's this cool and edgy guy. And at the end of the final episode, when Alex reveals, no, that's just how he dresses, Serena just says, oh, cool, and they go on continuing being friends.
Actually, this is how I usually dress. I didn't want you to know because...
Hey, I'd be the last person to judge somebody by their clothes. Come on, look at me.
What?
It's that friendship thing. It's that good conversation thing. It's that being a cool guy that you can hang out with and talk to. It's about the hang. That's the message of MTV Downtown. And that doesn't really make for good meme fuel, but it makes me feel really good. Okay, I think I talked enough. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like it. If you want to see more, subscribe. Join my Patreon if you want to see behind-the-scenes commentary. If you want to get this video 5 days earlier. There's so much more stuff I wanted to talk about. I really wanted to talk about graffiti in this because there's an entire episode dedicated to graffiti, and I think graffiti is fascinating, but a lot of people have already talked about graffiti more than me. Yeah, this video is already way too long. Thank you so much for even listening to this. Yeah, I love you. Thank you. Bye.